Assalamu alaikum bandiraɓe en fulɓe nden Aishatu Musa daga Shakkol Hulɓe TV ma da fata en puñan jam en kirti jam kafto ndabto en ɗo pokaren ɗo sudu weren do albarka ɗo Shakkol Hulɓe TV kullum min gaddano habaruji mawɗi ko shafi duroɓe iramoɓe hande ma to Allah jaɓi miɗi meten ɗo goɗɗum habaru mawɗum daga nder lesdi Nigeria amma kamin min fuɗɗa ɗum habaru miɗi ngaɗon munyal kasancewa wato fulfulde ande so akin fulfulde gari nantande sosai haɓire to nder banye musamman goɗɗum lokaci ɓurgi dame meta amma ngaɗe munyal maɗa fatade on pamto kunde yammi wodi ko gimmi meta habaru gimmi meta dow majum hande kan wiyete Grazing Reserve in Nigeria. Grazing Reserve in Nigeria turanci to wi Grazing Reserve kanjum woni jairije ɗe gwamnati Nigeria nokkani fulɓe tun e tarihi dennono kowa to anda ko ta anda ɗo to data lufi lallai tarihi holli gwamnati Nigeria tun daga waruki nasare nder lesdi Nigeria e wodi fiidiji ɗe nokkani fulɓe saboda gin alfanu maɓɓe e jawdewo maɓɓe ma'ana ɓe keɓa ɓe ngaɗa amfani ɗen ɗo fiidije ɓe kutira ɗe saboda gin amfani jawdewo maɓɓe in tarihi ne ɗum saboda no on ɗum ngete meta ɗo joni nder ɗum screen amme on tana emmo GM ko nani tarihi nde hunde kamma daga ɗum ɓe fassira ko mata fassirki nde ko yata woni tarihi mayre Grazing Reserve in Nigeria.
That's when we talk about Grazing Reserve that has been causing a lot of controversy around the country. Grazing Reserve is a land set aside by government for herdsmen to hold and graze their cattle. Now, this has raised lots and lots of questions from people across the country as to why will there be a grazing reserve set aside by government? But certainly, if on one hand, the people are saying, well, we don't want the cattle to come into our farms, the other argument is saying, why not create a grazing reserve and create this, and so that they have a certain place they can settle and then they go grazing. But this plan has been met with stiff resistance, like I said, from so many Nigerians. The establishment of grazing reserves is, however, not the brainchild of this administration. Nigeria tried the concept as far back as the pre-colonial era. I'd like to take you to those days. Now, it started in the 1950s. Now, that's former grazing reserves in Nigeria started in 1950s. It was supported by the government. The grazing reserve scheme was initiated from the abandoned government resettlement schemes. And certainly, if you take a note about by 1964, now the government had set aside about 6.4 million hectares of forest reserve aside, 98%, and that's about 98% Savannah, which is in Sokoto, in Bauchi, in Kaduna, in Kwara State, Katsina, Zamfara. These are some of the states that house just a few of the reserves in the country. Now, if we move ahead, we see that later in the year, the Northern Nigerian government incorporated the Fulani amenities proposal into grazing reserve law, and certainly that was by 1965. And by 1992, the identification of 28 million hectares for grazing reserve development was one area that it was raised up a little. So the activities really started in 1992, and cattle farming is a very lucrative business worldwide, but most countries no longer have grazing reserve but ranches.
Habar mo wiyata dendal turanci dunde hunde o wi wato Grazing Reserve in Nigeria ɗum huɗɗama tun 1950s ma'ana in hunde nde fuɗɗi tun ma lokaci da leydi ko woni juuɗe nasara kamma dalila majji wodi ma har lokaci ko gwamnati wato ɓangare legislative assembly ɗin ɓangare woyla Nigeria waddi wato goɗɗum shiri ɗum wiyata Fulani Amity Proposal in 1965 e lokaci ɗo gwamnati nokkani fulɓe hectaji million 6 har idugo nayi dow amma daga ɗo waɗi sojuki nde hunde waɗi ka nofukide fiiliji har wadduki 1992 in 1992 o wi gwamnati akalla nokkani fulɓe wato hectaji million 23 e lokaci ɗo jeriji de gwamnati nokkani fulɓe asiri ɗuɗɗe sosai saboda no ɗum kanjum ɗan tarihi nde hunde ko game da habaru nde hunde ko woni Grazing Reserve ɓangare no wonɗo saboda enen hunde nemde goɗɗo anduɗo tarihi ɓangare ko shafi ɗi habaruji inde makko Koli Solomon Shiloka eren dungu ɗum 2022 o wi don Nigeria e wodi Grazing Reserve ma'ana jayiri ɗe nokkani fulɓe jayirije 415 nder jihaji 21 nden na han wato Federal Capital Territory Abuja kamma nden majji gaba go e wodi wato ɗi waɗi gazetin ma'ana gwamnati yadake waɗanne da kakko dashi waɗanne game da ku shafi le hunde kama wala putuɗo atari wala putuɗo ma do nder majji wala putuɗo hutirade wodi wato 34% have been gazetted kama wodi wato 66% kanyu waɗayi gazeti majum saboda eno wodi bambanci ɗum ni kama wato wodi goɗɗo neɗɗo wiyeteɗo Newton Jibuno founder Fight Against Desert Encroachment FADE.
People have not been able to combat this encroachment. And of course, with the encroachment comes desertification. And the rate with which this is moving has brought about migration of the people to lands where they can find some greenery. And by migrating to just anywhere where they can find greenery for their animal herds, for them to practice their normal way of life, which is basically farming, means encroaching on other people's land to a point where we are beginning to have series of conflicts. From the 16 conflicts that we have in Africa today, 11 of them are as a result of migration. People migrating into their farmland, their green areas. And when people migrate into your farmland, just because they want to graze their animal herds, what do? You fight back. And before you know it, those little fights escalate into civil war. And so that is part of the problem that I have tried to address in various summits.
Newton Jibuno kasancewa duniya rodara kiyaye DJ musamman bangare gwamnati dana kama hannu be kiyayo de urije fudi remote na de kana tukin urije inga da kawa duki reme kama du fudi hunbiji hannu be kutira de urije nga de kare harki da no urije saboda gonan yara kan jabi de kama fudi kama nga de kawurta ke saboda gin da jara ke da kutira ka kwanin hutira do maje kama du fudi wato hudu na de kabanki daga urije daga de no de urije shi obanya to hana ma da shi ita dum kama dun de wata ko waddo yake duniya ro matsala hatta de ka be fanto in the next day Nigeria don der wata ko hode do inji Newton Jibuno